All right. Thank you, Tobin. And thank you so much, Commissioner Goldsmith-Romero, for joining us today. So we just completed a deep dive into our report, The Crypto Conundrum, why the SEC won't approve a spot Bitcoin ETF. So we're just going to jump right into it. And given that you previously worked at the SEC and now you're serving at the commission at the CFTC, would love to get your perspective on the main reason the SEC's denied these ETFs from coming to market and what they've detailed in their denials mostly focuses around market manipulation. And of course, as we just spoke, we do have Bitcoin futures contracts, which are under the CFTC's purview. So I would like to get your perspective on one, that concern that's been expressed, and then what type of infrastructure do we already have underway to address market manipulation? Do we already have a regulatory structure in place, and what does that look like to address this concern?
Well, that was a lot. So let me try to say that. So first of all, thank you, Perianne, thank you to the chamber. It's nice to be talking with you again. And I'm glad to be invited and share these thoughts. I have to give the standard government disclaimer, which you all are used to, which is the views are my own, and my views are my own and do not reflect the views of the commission or any of my fellow commissioners. So I can't comment on SEC decision making, not surprisingly. But as you've said, the SEC has approved futures ETF that are based on CFTC registered markets, so regulated markets. So I think it's probably helpful for me to give this perspective, sort of what we do and how we think of manipulation in our markets. So let me start off pretty high, which is, there is a risk of fraud and manipulation in all markets. That is the case with cryptocurrency. We have brought a significant number and significant type of enforcement actions, and that is really important. So the backbone of a CFTC regulatory regime are these core principles, which are really designed to ensure market integrity, preventing fraud, preventing manipulation. And so what we have is this sort of series of safeguards that are designed to do that. With these safeguards, what flows from that is investor confidence. And it's the investor confidence that makes our markets the strongest and safest in the world. So I'm always going to be focused on that market integrity, on ensuring that we have investor confidence. And I think we can all agree that that's what we want, right? We want investor confidence. That's what's going to make markets grow and work well and be strong. So I want to talk a little bit about the risk of manipulation. When you have a situation where market fundamentals are really not driving the pricing, you have an undermining market integrity. Once market integrity is undermined, investor confidence is going to erode. Nobody wants that. And that's when you get into this situation of there could potentially be runs. You don't have a smooth functioning market. So big part of what we're doing is trying to ensure markets are fair. All right, the markets have integrity. You can trust them, that you can go in and make your trades and rely on the protections that are there and that are there as part of a regulatory regime. So you want me to go into some of those anti-manipulation? Okay. So ultimately what it comes down to is the anti-manipulation regime that the CFTC sets up is really all driven by ensuring that our regulated exchanges have visibility into the underlying spot market where they're going to get their reference rate. That it's about price discovery. So, for example, before a product can launch on one of our regulated exchanges, the exchange has to certify to us, to the commission, that a series of things, but one of the most important is that product is not readily susceptible to manipulation. That's huge. And so what are we going to do to kind of look at that at the commission? We're going to see, are there a series of safeguards? And let me talk about just a few of them. So the first is there a robust surveillance program and system at the exchange? Second, is there coordination and cooperation between the futures exchange and the underlying spot market? So this is where, like, you've probably heard of this, the information sharing agreements. This is going to be critical, right? And so then you're looking to see, we're going to analyze what is the methodology by which you're coming up with the reference rate. And then we're going to sort of look at, so what are the safeguards on that methodology when there's some trades that don't look right? How are you going to control that? And ultimately, we're looking at sort of seeing whether there's sufficient trading volume and liquidity in the underlying market, so that it's not going to be susceptible to someone coming in, or one actor or concerted actors coming in and trying to manipulate that market and move the price off of the market fundamentals. So all of these there's a number of safeguards in addition to that, but all of these safeguards are really designed to say, can the exchange do the job we need it to do to prevent and detect market manipulation, which is the most important thing. Once we can do that, investors have confidence in that. And so that's how we're sort of set up to prevent manipulation.
Right. And so in 2017, when the first Bitcoin futures contracts launched, we have the reference rate. There's 5 crypto exchanges that make up the reference rate. So this is the type of structure that's already in place just for the Bitcoin futures contracts.
Yes.
So now we're talking about spot, which of course spot would use a lot of the same protections that are already in place. And that's where the conundrum comes in, is, why was the SEC comfortable with the futures but not the spot? Because it's kind of the same, the same market integrity infrastructure that needs to be in place for that. So maybe let's talk about how it would change. So today, Congress, there's a handful of bills in Congress that are actually going to be discussed today, and the hearings both in Senate Ag and Senate Banking, and some of them would give the CFTC spot market oversight of the digital commodity markets. So if Congress were to give the CFTC this authority, can you talk about what that would look like in the future, and how that changes how you're currently looking at the markets?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And you're all following this, right? I know you are, because you're sitting in this room. So this is important to you. Let me tell you, one of the very interesting things about the Act is that it has consumer protection in the title. And so the consumer protection aspect of it is going to drive a lot of what we do. And obviously anti-manipulation and anti-fraud and all of these play into that. So we have to think about consumers in a different way in these markets. When you're talking about the spot market, you're talking about a lot of retail. So, you don't have a lot of retail in corn futures, right? Wheat futures.
Buying barrels of oil.
Right? So all of a sudden, now we're talking a bit different. We're talking about regular, kind of, I call them household retail, regular people. And so coming into our regulatory regime. And I will say that the Act looks very similar to a CFTC regulatory regime. It's got a lot of the same backbone with these core principles and these other requirements. But we do have to think about it different. So we do have to shift to thinking more about sort of consumer protections for retail. I want to talk about 2 that are kind of top of mind for me that I've been looking at, which is segregation of customer assets and conflicts of interest. So I think probably some of you have read about segregation of customer assets. It's essentially the customer's property is treated as it's its own, as it's the customer's. And so you don't commingle it with like the digital commodity platform, for example. There's going to be certain rights in bankruptcy. Those types of issues are going to be really, really important. And they're kind of fundamental. I mean, I think most people in America think that what's in their accounts, you've grown to expect that you have control over that someone can't just sweep it, right? So we're really trying to get the idea of let's just get it to look more like a regular transaction that Americans are used to having. Second, conflicts of interest. So we have this situation, and this can exist in other markets too, where you have, one company or its affiliates serving multiple functions. So you are a broker, you are an exchange, you are the custodian, you are a market maker, you are a clearinghouse. And that is just going to present a number of different conflicts of interest that have to be dealt with. So if you think about it, there's consumer protection angles that come in with that. There's disclosures, but there's really the more important thing is how do you resolve those conflicts of interest? How do you resolve the conflicts of interest so that we can ensure the market has integrity? And then there's just some financial stability concerns that come with what if there's a severe event, market event, to that company. If it goes all the way through the chain, through all those different important layers of how we think about trading, that's going to become an issue. And then there's just sort of all this kind of nuts and bolts of an exchange. Let me talk about exchanges for a while. So we have these system safeguard requirements that would come into play. I mean, some of this, cybersecurity, right, going to be very important, anti-money laundering. But then there's just order processing, price reporting, sort of all of those, disaster recovery, all of those kind of nuts and bolts. Can the exchange meet all the requirements that we have for all of our other exchanges so that we know that they can do the job? And so I think there's going to be a lot of focus on that, but I will say it will be huge. I mean, right? If you have a big part of the market that is now regulated, I think that's ultimately going to lead to investor confidence and probably bring more customers in, including potentially institutional customers.
Well, speaking about significant market events, today is the hangover from the merge. Whoever stayed up all night watching that, who's had a long night and an early morning, as I'm sure you are aware, Ethereum has merged away from proof of work to a proof of stake network. Commissioner, I'd love to get your thoughts. Are there any policy implications of this? This is probably one of the biggest kind of infrastructure shifts we've seen happen in this industry. Does this trigger any type of policy questions?
So who stayed up till 2:45 in the morning? Raise your hand. Oh my gosh.
The people with multiple cups of coffee.
Should we give them just a minute to go get another cup of coffee? Wow. I mean, the reports are that it was successful, and hopefully it will. I will say, when we look at Ethereum and all these other products, we are looking to see what is a commodity. CFTC has long taken the position that Ethereum is a commodity. The definition of commodity is very, very broad. So I continue to take the position that Ethereum is a commodity, even with proof of stake. The other policy issue that comes with this merge is the climate implications. And I think this is hugely important for the industry and for all the actions that we're trying to take to address the climate issues. And I think that that's one of the most important things that will happen here. And following that, and if it works and is really successful, I think that could potentially drive other parts of the industry to be focused on reducing the impact of the climate. But I continue to think of Ethereum as a commodity.
Great. So we have time for one more question. So I wanted to talk about the broader regulatory conversation. So earlier this year, President Biden issued an executive order on digital assets. which triggered a process of a number of studies and reports across the federal government. Can you talk about, one, the CFTC's role in the executive order? And then two, can you also talk about how this is going to impact public policy going forward? So we have a very regular footprint on Capitol Hill. We spend a lot of time with members on both sides of the aisle. And we have found that there are some members who are waiting to kind of see what happens with all these studies and reports before making comments or sponsoring legislation or introducing legislation. And so we'd like to get your input on how this is impacting the policy process, but how that's going to drive the regulatory considerations, given we already have legislative proposals in front of Congress now. Is this going to change that? Are those going to maybe come together? What do we have in stake with the executive order?
Yeah. So first of all, I think the executive order is incredibly important, because it is saying and recognizing a need for a whole of government sort of look at trying to come up with what is the regulatory regime for the future for digital assets. And so there was just one of the reports just came out from the White House related to the climate issues. There are other reports that are going to be coming out on consumer protection. There are other reports that are going to be coming out from us at the CFTC. All of these are going to raise issues that need to be dealt with. Not all of them will need to be dealt with in some manner through legislation, right? It's going to be a combination of legislation plus regulatory action. And so it's sort of setting the roadmap. And while I'm sure the industry would want everything to move quicker, I think the most important thing is that we get it right. What we're trying to do as a coordinated federal government is develop something that stands the test of time. And we have to think about how we have an industry that's going to continue to evolve, and we have to set up the regulatory framework that's going to work now, but years down the road and for the future that you can count on. And I think that's important. I think everyone is really focused on doing that.
Well, thank you so much. And obviously, the CFTC has one role to play in the policymaking for digital assets. But to your point, this whole of government approach, there's a lot of stakeholders involved. Yeah. The SEC, the CFTC, just in Treasury, you have FinCEN, OFAC, and IRS, all who have guidance specific to cryptocurrencies. Congress has a role to play, the State Department, Defense. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of all the various agencies and bureaus within the government involved in the future of digital assets. But what's important is that we get it right. Because if we get it wrong, there's a lot at stake. I'm trying to come up with a better word than stake, but no pun intended there. We certainly believe that digital assets and blockchain technology are the future, and we want that future to be here in the United States.
Great. And you want the confidence of investors. You know, retail investors, institutional investors, and all of that, and you want to have good market integrity. That's what we're going for. So I appreciate the opportunity to come chat with you, and always interested in your ideas. Just so you know, I have on the CFTC website, on my page on that, an email that goes to my office. If there's anything anyone wants to ever raise to me, please feel free to do that. I'm also sponsoring the Technology Advisory Committee for the CFTC, so happy to hear any thoughts, and appreciate. Thank you. Thank you, Perianne.
Thank you so much. And Commissioner Goldsmith-Romero she's met with us on things like climate issues and other blockchain policy related considerations. So we appreciate the time and the attention you're taking to our industry.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Good luck. Have fun today.